Horrifying. Instead of weeping beside the coffin of the woman he loved most, he chose a path of blood, turning himself into the monster who ruled the darkness of Los Angeles, all for revenge. Have you ever wondered a notorious kingpin so wealthy he could buy a small country so powerful that the entire city bows in fear? Yet every single day he secretly slips away to a run-down little eatery on the edge of Koreatown, sits in the darkest corner booth and orders the exact same bowl of doenjang, jjigae, and kimchi, just to feel the last remnants of pain in a heart that died 30 years ago. He is Dae-hyun Kim, the man whose name alone makes enemies tremble. He has everything: money, power, the terror he inspires in others, but not a single person who can see the real man behind the monster. Until one pouring rainy morning in late October 2025, when a 6-year-old girl soaked to the bone, barefoot face streaked with tears and mud, bursts into the shop, grabs his sleeve and whispers through broken sobs, "They're beating my mama. She's bleeding so much. She won't wake up. Please, sir, save my mama." And in that instant, the 30-year-old wall of ice around the kingpin of the night shattered completely. Can a monster who has lived in blood and shadows for decades become the savior of a single mother and her 3 children being crushed by poverty and violence? A story of wild, tear-soaked, haunting love is about to begin. Are you ready to step into the world of Dae-hyun Kim? Before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel Crimson Romance Stories and like this video. Every subscription, like, and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth, so we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotions or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. All right, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. I am Dae-hyun Kim, and at 48 years old, I rule the Korean underworld of Los Angeles with an iron hand wrapped in silk. My skin is fair, almost porcelain, a quiet reminder of the Korean blood that courses through me even after decades in America. I own penthouses in Beverly Hills that overlook the city like a king's throne, fleets of blacked-out Escalades, and enough offshore accounts to buy small countries. Yet every morning at exactly 7:15, I slip away from my security detail, trade my tailored suits for a plain black hoodie and faded jeans, and drive alone to the same small banchan shop on the edge of Koreatown. The place is called Grandma's Table. It's a narrow, dimly lit hole in the wall that smells of sesame oil, fermented chili paste, and the faint sweetness of rice steaming in the back. The walls are yellowed from years of cooking fumes, the vinyl floor cracked, the wooden tables scarred from 1,000 meals. I sit in the very corner booth every single day, the one farthest from the door where the light barely reaches. I order the same thing: a small bowl of doenjang, jjigae, a side of kimchi, and a scoop of plain white rice. No one here knows who I really am. To the elderly Korean aunties who run the place, I'm just the quiet guy who tips well and never smiles. That anonymity is the only peace I ever get. Inside, though, I'm a storm that never stops raging. 30 years ago, I lost the only woman who ever saw past the monster I became. Dae-hyun was 29, pregnant with our first child, when a rival crew ambushed her in a parking garage because they couldn't touch me directly. They left her body in the trunk of her own car. I never cried at the funeral. I just went to war. I buried every emotion so deep that even I forgot where I hid it. Now, I live alone in a glass fortress that echoes with silence. I have power, money, fear, everything except the one thing that matters: someone who looks at me and sees Daniel, not Dae-hyun Kim, the man who owns the night. Every morning I sit here spooning the jjigae slowly, letting the heat burn my tongue just to feel something real. The guilt is a living thing inside me. It claws at my ribs when I breathe too deeply. I ask myself the same question every day: why am I still breathing when she isn't? The answer is always the same: because someone has to make the city pay, so I make it pay. I collect debts, I settle scores, I keep the balance with blood when necessary, and every single day I hate myself a little more for it. That Tuesday morning in late October 2025 started no different. The sky was heavy with rain clouds that never quite broke. I parked my plain gray Honda 2 blocks away, walked the rest, and slid into my booth. The auntie behind the counter, Mrs. Park 73, hands knotted from arthritis, nodded at me the way she always did. "Same as usual?" she asked. I gave her the smallest tilt of my head. She turned back to the kitchen, and I stared out the streaked window at the street. Then the door opened. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, stumbled in barefoot. Her thin cotton dress was soaked through, clinging to her skinny arms and legs. Her dark skin was ashen from cold, her lips blue. She had run through the rain without a coat. Her small chest heaved with sobs she was trying to swallow. Every eye in the shop turned. Mrs. Park froze with a ladle in her hand. The girl's eyes, huge, terrified brown as polished walnuts, swept the room desperately. Then they locked on me. She ran straight to my table. Her tiny hands grabbed my sleeve with such force that my coffee cup rattled. She looked up at me, tears cutting clean tracks down her dirt-streaked cheeks, and her voice cracked like thin ice. "They're beating my mama," she whispered. "She's bleeding. She won't wake up. Please, help her." The words hit me like a hollow point round straight through the chest. For a heartbeat, the entire world narrowed to those enormous pleading eyes. I felt the old walls inside me tremble. The guilt I carried every day suddenly had a new face. This child's mother somewhere out there in the rain, bleeding on a cold floor, while her daughter ran through the storm to beg a monster for mercy. I looked down at the little girl. Her name was Zoe Thompson, though I wouldn't learn that until later, and something inside me ruptured. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. I saw Dae-hyun in her trembling lips, in the way she clung to me like I was the only thing between her and the end of the world. I saw the child we never had. I saw the life I stole from myself the day I let revenge become everything. My voice came out low, rough, almost unrecognizable. "Where is she, sweetheart?" Zoe's small fingers tightened on my sleeve. "The apartment above the laundromat on Normandy. They came for money she doesn't have. They hit her with a pipe. There's so much blood." I felt the rage rise like black fire in my throat, but I forced it down. Not yet, not in front of her. I stood slowly, towering over her tiny frame, and knelt so we were eye to eye. My hands that had ended lives without hesitation, reached out and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. "I'm going to help your mama," I said, the promise burning in my chest like a vow. "I swear it on my life." She stared at me wide-eyed, confused, terrified, and somewhere deep inside, hopeful. She didn't know who I was. She only knew I was the man who didn't turn away. I lifted her into my arms without thinking. She was so light, so fragile, like she hadn't eaten properly in days. I could feel every rib under her soaked dress. My heart tore open wider. Mrs. Park hurried over with a towel. I wrapped Zoe in it, then looked at my driver, who had followed me inside, standing frozen by the door. "Get the car," I said quietly. "Now." He moved without a word. As I carried Zoe toward the exit, I felt the storm inside me shift. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't fighting for power or territory. I was fighting for something real. And I knew with absolute certainty that I would burn this city to the ground before I let anything happen to this child or her mother. I carried Zoe out into the rain, her small body shivering against my chest even through the towel. The black Escalade pulled up silently, tires hissing on the wet asphalt. My driver Jin stepped out with an umbrella, but I waved him off. The cold rain felt like punishment, and I deserved every drop. Zoe buried her face in my shoulder, her breath warm against my neck. In that moment, holding her, I felt the full weight of my emptiness. All the money, the power, the fear I inspired, it meant nothing compared to this fragile life trusting me completely. We drove south on Normandy Avenue through the heart of Koreatown, where neon signs blurred in the downpour. The street was lined with old apartment buildings, some with flickering vacancy signs, others with laundry flapping on makeshift lines even in this weather. Zoe whispered directions in a voice so soft I had to lean close to hear. "Turn left at the laundromat, the big blue one with the broken sign." I knew the place, Sunny Coin Laundry, a run-down spot wedged between a 24-hour Korean barbecue joint and a check cashing store. Above it rose a tired 3-story stucco building, paint-peeling windows barred. This was where Grace Thompson lived, on the absolute edge of everything. As we pulled up, the scene hit me like a gut punch. The apartment door on the second floor, number 12, hung open, swaying in the wind. Shouts echoed from inside, rough male voices laced with menace. 2 men from a rival Latino street crew that had been pushing into our territory stood in the hallway, one holding a metal pipe. On the floor lay a woman, Grace curled protectively, blood pooling from a gash on her forehead. She was emaciated, her frame so thin it broke something deep inside me. Her dark skin was pale from exhaustion and cold, her clothes threadbare, stained from endless nights of scraping by. 3 small plastic bags of groceries lay scattered, cheap rice, canned beans, a half-gallon of milk now spilling across the cracked linoleum. This was what they were shaking her down for protection money she didn't have. Zoe whimpered, clutching me tighter. "Mama!" Rage exploded in my chest, hot and violent, but I forced it into something cold and precise. I handed Zoe to Jin. "Stay with her. Lock the doors." Then I stepped out into the rain, my men falling in behind me without a word. The 2 enforcers saw us too late. Recognition flashed in their eyes, fear, pure and sharp. "Mr. Kim, this ain't your business," the one with the pipe stammered, backing up. His partner dropped the bag he was rifling through. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Everything in this city is my business when it involves mothers and children. My tone was quiet, but it carried the weight of every life I'd taken, every debt I'd collected. They knew the stories. They knew what happened to people who crossed lines like this. The confrontation was tense, the air thick with danger. Rain pounded the awning overhead. One of them reached toward his waistband, foolish, desperate. My lieutenant stepped forward, hand visible but ready. "Don't," he warned. The man froze. I walked past them, straight to Grace. She stirred weakly as I knelt, her eyes fluttering open, deep brown, filled with dread, then confusion, then raw fear at seeing me, a stranger in expensive clothes surrounded by armed men. "It's okay," I said softly, my voice gentler than I'd used in years. "I'm here because of Zoe." She found me. I pressed a clean handkerchief from my pocket against her wound, my fair-skinned hand contrasting sharply with her dark skin. She flinched at first, suspicious, powerless, her body trembling from pain and cold nights without enough heat. But as the bleeding slowed, curiosity flickered in her gaze, cautious, timid. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice restrained, respectful, like someone addressing authority far above her station. "Someone who can help," I answered. And in that instant, looking into her eyes, eyes that held oceans of despair, sleepless exhaustion, the humiliation of hunger and eviction notices, I felt it. An overwhelming surge, fierce and burning. Love, not pity, not duty. Love, immediate and passionate, crashing through the walls I'd built since Dae-hyun's death. It terrified me. It healed me. This woman, crushed by cruel fate and irrational injustice, the system that let a single mother with 3 children fall this far, had ignited something I thought long dead. My men handled the rivals quietly but firmly. Warnings delivered, promises of consequences if they returned. No shots fired, just the kind of street-level standoff that ended with them leaving tails between their legs, knowing they'd poked the wrong bear. I lifted Grace carefully. She weighed almost nothing, her body battered by relentless hardship, and carried her down the stairs to the warmth of the Escalade. Zoe crawled into her lap, sobbing softly. Grace held her daughter close, shock giving way to dizziness, emotional numbness. Her head lolled against my shoulder as confusion deepened into pain. "Why? Why are you doing this?" she murmured, voice breaking. I didn't answer yet. I couldn't. The inner turmoil raged, guilt for my violent world clashing with this explosive need to protect her, to give her everything I'd hoarded in loneliness. As we drove toward the private clinic I kept for emergencies, rain streaking the windows, I held them both. For the first time in decades, the storm inside me, quieted, replaced by a fierce, burning resolve. Grace Thompson had no idea yet, but she and her children were no longer alone. And I, Daniel Kim, the monster who ruled the shadows, would tear apart anyone who tried to hurt them again. The rain had turned vicious by the time we reached the private clinic in Beverly Hills, a discreet white brick building tucked behind gated palms that most people never noticed. I carried Grace inside myself, her head resting against my chest, blood soaking through my shirt. Zoe trailed behind, holding Jin's hand, her small bare feet leaving wet prints on the marble floor. The contrast hit me like a physical blow. My world of polished luxury swallowing their world of raw survival. Grace's body was so light, so fragile from months, maybe years of hunger and sleepless nights chasing dead-end jobs. Her breathing was shallow, her skin cold despite the heat I tried to shield her with. The doctor on call, a Korean-American surgeon I kept on retainer, met us in the private wing. He took one look at Grace and started barking quiet orders to nurses. I laid her on the examination table under bright lights, and for the first time I saw her fully. Early 30s maybe, but hardship had carved deep lines around her eyes. Her hair was matted, her cheekbones sharp from malnutrition. A faded scar ran along her collarbone, old, maybe from some earlier cruelty life had thrown at her. My heart twisted violently. How had the city I controlled let a woman like this fall so far? Grace stirred as they cleaned the wound, her eyes fluttering open. Confusion flooded her face. First, then fear, raw, animal fear of waking in an unfamiliar place surrounded by strangers in expensive scrubs. She tried to sit up, panic rising. "Zoe, my babies, where are my kids?" Her voice was soft, timid, cracked from pain and exhaustion. I stepped closer gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Zoe's right here, safe. And your other 2 children, I'm sending men to bring them now." I nodded to Jin, who was already on the phone arranging pickup from the neighbor who sometimes watched them for scraps of food. Her gaze locked on mine, suspicion warring with desperate hope. "Why are you doing this, sir?" She whispered the word, "sir," slipping out like a reflex born from years of being powerless before landlords, social workers, bill collectors. "People like you don't help people like me." Those words sliced deeper than any knife ever had. People like me. She saw the suit under the blood, the watch that cost more than her yearly rent, the quiet authority that made nurses jump. And she saw the monster behind it. Guilt roared through me. Guilt for every dollar I'd taken, through fear, every life I'd ruined to build this empire. I wanted to tell her I wasn't always this man, that once I'd been someone who believed in gentleness. Instead, I only said, "Because your daughter asked me to." Zoe climbed onto the bed, then curling against her mother's side. Grace wrapped thin arms around her, tears spilling silently. The sight of them together, so fragile, so beautiful in their unbreakable bond, ignited the love I'd felt earlier into something fiercer, more consuming. It terrified me. I had sworn never to love again after Dae-hyun, because love was a weakness enemies could exploit. Yet here it was burning through every defense, demanding I protect this woman and her children with my life. The doctor finished stitching the head wound and started an IV for fluids and pain medication. "She's severely dehydrated and malnourished," he told me quietly. "Multiple old bruises, signs of chronic stress. She needs rest, nutrition, and safety." Safety. The word echoed in my skull. I would give her that even if it meant war. My phone buzzed. My Lieutenant Min-ho. "Boss, the crew that hit her apartment. They're from the 18th Street faction pushing north. Word is, they marked her building because she couldn't pay the new tax after the last crew got run out. They're circling back tonight to finish collecting from the whole block." Rage and remorse collided inside me. This was my city. These streets were under my protection. How had I let this injustice fester right under my nose? Grace and her children were paying for my blind spots. I leaned down to Grace, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead with a tenderness that shocked even me. "Sleep now. No one will hurt you again." Her eyes searched mine, cautious, curious, a flicker of something warmer beneath the fear. Then the medication pulled her under her face, softening for the first time. I kissed Zoe's forehead, promised her I'd be back soon, and stepped into the hallway. The storm inside me had become a hurricane. Within the hour, my convoy rolled into the old neighborhood, 6 black SUVs cutting through the rain like sharks. The rival crew was already there, 5 men shaking down tenants in the courtyard, flashlights slicing through the dark. They saw us too late. I stepped out first, rain soaking me instantly. The leader, a thick-necked man with 18th Street tattoos, recognized me and paled. "Mr. Kim, this is just street business. We didn't know she was under your—" "She is now," I said, voice low, deadly calm. My men fanned out, forming a silent wall. The air crackled with tension. One of the younger ones reached inside his jacket, foolish bravado. Min-ho moved like lightning, pinning the arm without a sound. No shots, no blood, just the unmistakable message: cross this line again, and there would be no tomorrow. The leader backed down, fast, muttering apologies, promising retreat. I let him go with a warning that echoed through the courtyard. "This block is off limits, permanently. Tell your bosses Daniel Kim has claimed it." As they scattered into the night, tenants peeked from cracked doors, faces worn by the same poverty that had crushed Grace. I felt the weight of their stares, the injustice of a system that let good people starve while men like me grew fat on fear. The remorse was excruciating. Back at the clinic, I sat beside Grace's bed in the dim light, watching her sleep. Zoe and her two older brothers, Isaiah, 9, and Malik, 7, curled up on the pull-out sofa nearby, finally warm, finally safe. The love inside me swelled until it hurt. I reached out and took Grace's hand, careful not to wake her. In that quiet moment, I made a silent vow to whatever God might still listen to a man like me. I would give her the world she deserved, even if it cost me everything. The storm outside raged on, but inside my fractured heart something new was growing, fierce, passionate, unstoppable. I stood in the doorway of the clinic room, watching Grace sleep under the soft glow of the bedside lamp. Her breathing had steadied the IV dripping steadily into her thin arm. Zoe lay curled against her mother's side, small fingers tangled in Grace's faded sweater. Isaiah and Malik slept on the pull-out sofa, finally warm after months of shivering through Los Angeles nights. The sight of them safe, clean, fed should have brought me peace. Instead, it tore me open wider. I had built an empire on fear and calculation. I had ended lives without blinking. Yet here I was, undone by a woman I had known for less than 2 hours. The love that had surged through me when I first saw her eyes was now a living flame scorching every corner of my soul. It terrified me. Love had cost me Dae-hyun. It would cost me everything again if I let it. But I could not stop it. Every time I looked at Grace's hollow cheeks, her bruised skin, the way her body trembled even in sleep from years of cold and hunger, the flame burned hotter. I stepped into the hallway and closed the door softly. My phone vibrated. Minho again. Boss, the 18th Street crew didn't scatter like we thought. They're regrouping 3 blocks away. Word is they're coming back for the whole building tonight. They're calling it a matter of respect. Respect. The word tasted like ash. They had beaten a mother in front of her children over a few dollars, and now they wanted respect. My hands shook with a rage so pure it felt holy. I had failed to protect my own family once. I would not fail this one. Meet me at the corner of Normandy and 8th, I said. Bring the usual team. No guns drawn unless they force it. I kissed Zoe's forehead, then Grace's, her skin warm now, the faint scent of hospital antiseptic mixed with something uniquely her. My heart ached with a tenderness I had not felt in decades. I'll be back soon, I whispered, though she couldn't hear me. 20 minutes later, my convoy rolled into the old neighborhood. The rain had eased into a fine mist that turned streetlights into halos. The courtyard between the apartment buildings was lit by a single flickering bulb. 5 men from the rival crew stood under it, hoods up, bats and pipes in hand. They were laughing about the woman they had left bleeding upstairs. I stepped out alone, rain misting my face. My men stayed back, shadows among shadows. The leader saw me and straightened, bravado masking fear. "Merkim, didn't expect you out in this weather. You expected me to let you terrorize a mother and her children?" My voice was quiet, but it carried across the courtyard like a blade. "You expected me to let you come back for more." The man shrugged, trying to look casual. "Business is business. She owes us. We're just collecting what's ours." I took one step forward. "She owes you nothing. Not tonight, not ever again." Tension crackled in the air. One of the younger men shifted, pipe tapping against his palm. My men moved closer, silent and ready. The leader held up a hand. "Easy. We don't want trouble with you." "Then leave," I said. "Walk away and never come back to this block. Tell your bosses Daniel Kim has claimed it." The leader hesitated. I could see the calculation in his eyes, pride against survival. Finally, he spat on the ground. "Fine, we're gone. But this ain't over." "It is over," I replied. "And if I see any of you within 10 blocks of this building again, it will be over for good." They backed away slowly, disappearing into the mist. My men followed at a distance until they were gone. Only then did the tightness in my chest ease slightly. But the guilt remained, guilt that this injustice had happened at all, that I had let these streets become places where a mother could be beaten for pennies. I returned to the clinic just before dawn. Grace was awake, sitting up against the pillows, her children still sleeping. She looked at me with a mixture of awe and fear. "You came back?" she whispered, voice soft and restrained. I promised I would. I sat beside her bed, taking her hand gently. Her fingers were cold despite the blankets. "How do you feel?" She looked down at our joined hands, my fair skin against her dark, my manicured nails against her work-worn ones. "Like I'm dreaming," she said. No one has ever helped me like this. Not without wanting something." The words pierced me. I squeezed her hand. I want nothing except to keep you safe, you and your children. Her eyes searched mine, confusion giving way to cautious curiosity. Why me? Why us? I could have lied. I could have said it was just business. But the truth burned too fiercely. Because when I looked at you, I saw everything I lost, and I saw everything I still want to protect. Tears welled in her eyes. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, resting her forehead against my shoulder. I wrapped my arms around her carefully, feeling her thin frame shake with silent sobs. In that moment, the love inside me became absolute. I would move mountains for her. I would burn empires if I had to. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. Thank you, Mr. Kim. I don't know how to repay you. You don't have to repay me, I said. Just let me take care of you. Let me give you the life you deserve. She nodded slowly, still dazed, still afraid, but something new flickered in her eyes. Hope. Fragile, trembling, but real. I stayed until the sun rose, holding her hand, watching her children sleep, feeling the storm in my heart finally find its center. For the first time in 30 years, I was not alone. The first week blurred into a haze of hospital corridors and quiet decisions. I moved Grace and the children to a private suite in the clinic, spacious sunlit rooms with views of manicured gardens that felt like another planet compared to the cracked walls and leaking ceilings they had known. Nurses brought trays of fresh fruit, warm soups, and soft blankets. Isaiah and Malik stared wide-eyed at the television mounted on the wall, something they had rarely seen in color. Zoe never left her mother's side, drawing pictures with crayons I had delivered in bulk. I was there every day, every night. My lieutenants handled business from a distance, but I could not pull myself away. Each time I entered the room, Grace's eyes would lift to mine, first with caution, then with a softening that made my chest ache. She was gaining strength slowly, color returning to her cheeks, but the marks of poverty lingered the way she hoarded food on her tray, as if it might vanish the flinch when a door closed too loudly, the quiet shame in her voice when she thanked me yet again. One evening in late October 2025, the children finally asleep after an afternoon of stories and laughter they had not known in years. Grace and I sat alone on the small balcony overlooking the city lights. I had brought her a soft cashmere blanket, something simple from my own closet, and wrapped it around her shoulders myself. She trembled slightly, not from cold, but from the overwhelming strangeness of being cared for. "You don't have to keep coming," she said softly, her voice restrained, respectful. "You've already done more than anyone ever has." I sat beside her close enough to feel the warmth of her body. "I'm not here because I have to be," I answered. "I'm here because I want to be. Because I can't stay away." She turned to look at me, confusion and curiosity warring in her eyes. "A man like you, with all this power, all this money, why would you want to be near someone like me? I got nothing to give back." The words struck like a physical blow. I reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. My fair fingers brushed her dark skin, and neither of us moved. "You have everything to give," I whispered. "You have courage. You have love for your children that would shame kings. You have a heart that kept beating through hell. That's worth more than anything I own." Tears gathered in her eyes. She had spent years believing she was invisible, worthless, a burden on a world that had turned its back. Now, sitting wrapped in luxury, she could never have imagined being told she was valuable by a man whose very name made streets fall silent. It was too much. Her breath hitched, dizziness washing over her face. She swayed slightly, and I caught her gently, pulling her against my chest. "I'm scared," she admitted in a broken whisper voice muffled against my shirt. "Scared this is a dream. Scared I'll wake up back in that apartment with the heat shut off and the kids crying from hunger." "You won't," I said fiercely, my arms tightening around her. "I swear on everything I am, you will never go back to that." In that moment, the forbidden spark that had flickered since the night I carried her from the rain became a blaze. I tilted her chin up, searching her eyes for permission for any sign she felt, even a fraction of what raged inside me. She didn't pull away. Instead, her hand rose tentatively to touch my cheek, hesitant, reverent, as if afraid I might vanish. Our lips met softly, at first a question, then deeper, desperate. Years of my loneliness, her hardship poured into that kiss. It was tender and fierce all at once, my wealth and power meaningless against the simple, overwhelming truth that I loved her, passionately, completely, irrevocably. When we parted, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against mine. Shock, disorientation, and something warmer shone in her eyes. "I don't understand this," she whispered, "but I feel it too." Joy and terror collided inside me. Joy that she felt something back. Terror that my world would destroy her as it had destroyed Dae-hyun. But I pushed the fear down. For the first time in decades, I chose hope. The next morning brought reality crashing back. My phone rang with news from Min-ho. The 18th Street leadership, humiliated by the courtyard standoff, had put a price on information about the woman Kim is protecting. They were circling, asking questions in the old neighborhood, leaning on tenants who couldn't afford to stay silent. I returned to the clinic with fire in my veins. Grace noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked, voice timid but steady. "Some people haven't learned their lesson," I said. I would not frighten her with details. Instead, I arranged for discreet security around the clinic and began planning a final message. That night, I led a small team to a neutral warehouse where the rival lieutenant waited to talk terms. The air was thick with tension rain pounding the metal roof shadows deep. He arrived with 4 men, I with 3. Words were exchanged, threats veiled as negotiation. When he smirked and said, "A man in your position shouldn't risk everything for some charity case," something inside me snapped, not into violence but into cold clarity. I stepped forward until we were inches apart. "She is not a charity case," I said, voice low enough to chill the room. "She is mine to protect, and if anyone comes near her or her children again, there will be no more talks." He backed down, the message delivered without a single blow. My dominance was absolute, but the cost was the growing storm in my heart. How long before my enemies used her against me? Back at the clinic, I found Grace awake, staring out the window. I sat beside her, pulling her into my arms without a word. She melted against me, the forbidden spark now a steady flame. In the quiet, holding her, I knew I would face whatever came next. For her, for the love I had never expected to find again. The days after that first kiss became a delicate dance between heaven and torment. I moved Grace and the children out of the clinic and into a quiet gated house in the hills above Koreatown, one of my lesser properties, elegant but understated, with high walls and round-the-clock security disguised as gardeners and maintenance staff. From the outside, it looked like any affluent Los Angeles home: manicured lawns, a pool that sparkled under the October sunrooms filled with warm light and soft furniture. Inside, Grace walked as if the floors might crack beneath her feet, her eyes wide with constant disbelief. I could not stay with them openly. My enemies were watching too closely, so I became a shadow in their new life. Gifts arrived without notes. Grocery deliveries of fresh produce, organic meats and fruits the children had never tasted. Winter coats from Rodeo Drive boutiques sized perfectly for each child. A full scholarship packet for private schooling that covered everything from uniforms to tutoring. Medical specialists visited the house for Mia's worsening kidney condition, bringing equipment and hope that public clinics had denied them for years. All of it anonymous, all of it from me. I watched from a distance at first, parked down the street in an unmarked car, heart pounding with a mixture of joy and agony. Seeing Grace laugh with her children over a real dinner, seeing color return to their faces, filled me with a fierce, possessive love that terrified me more each day. But the guilt was relentless. Every luxury I gave them reminded me of the blood on my hands, the lives I had taken to afford it. How could I taint their new beginning with my darkness? Grace sensed the help came from one source. One morning, as fall deepened into late October 2025, she began leaving small signs of gratitude at the one place she knew I frequented, Grandma's table, the banchan shop where Zoe had first found me. She had taken a quiet early morning cleaning job there, something light, something that let her feel she was contributing. I arrived at 7:15 as always, and found my usual bowl of jjigae accompanied by an extra portion of perfectly seasoned spinach namul arranged with care. The next day, a small cup of warm yuja tea waited beside my rice, no charge added. Then a folded note under the plate: "Thank you for giving us a home." Gee, my throat closed reading it. I sat in my corner booth longer than usual, staring at the handwriting, the love inside me swelling until it hurt to breathe. The rivals had not stayed quiet. Word spread that Daniel Kim was soft, now distracted by a woman and her children. A new crew, this one tied to a Mexican cartel pushing north, began testing boundaries. They sent scouts to the old neighborhood, asking questions about the family I had pulled from the building on Normandy. One afternoon, a black SUV followed the discreet van that took the children to their new school. My security intercepted it, blocks away a tense standoff in a quiet suburban street, engines idling, windows down, hard stares exchanged. No shots, but the message was clear: back off or escalate. I handled it personally that night. I met their mid-level captain in a deserted parking lot near Dodger Stadium, rain threatening again. My men ringed the perimeter. His did the same. He smirked at first. "Heard you're playing house now, Kim. Dangerous game." I stepped close enough that he could see the ice in my eyes. "Touch them, and you won't live long enough to regret it." My voice was calm, but the threat carried the weight of every territory I controlled. He swallowed, bravado cracking. By morning, his crew pulled back. Another victory bought with fear, but the victories felt hollow. Each confrontation reminded me how fragile this happiness was. I could protect them from street crews, but not from my past, not from the day someone decided Grace was the perfect leverage. I began visiting the house in the evenings, slipping through a side gate after dark. Grace would meet me in the kitchen barefoot, wearing one of the soft sweaters I had sent. We talked for hours in whispers so the children would not wake. She told me about the sleepless nights before eviction notices taped to the door, choosing between medicine for Mia and food for the boys, crying in the shower so the children would not hear. Her voice stayed soft, timid when she spoke of her shame, but her eyes held steady on mine, curiosity growing into trust. One night she reached across the table and took my hand. "I know it's you," she said quietly. "All of it. The house, the doctors, the food. Why won't you let me thank you in person?" I brought her hand to my lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "Because I don't deserve thanks. I'm the reason people like you suffer in the first place." She shook her head, tears rising. "You saved us. You're giving us life." I pulled her into my arms, then holding her as if she were the only real thing in my world. The love was no longer a surge. It was a tide pulling me under. I kissed her slowly, deeply tasting salt from her tears. She clung to me, body trembling with the same overwhelming emotion. In the quiet aftermath, wrapped together on the sofa, I felt the full weight of what I had done. I had dragged light into my darkness, and now I would fight every shadow to keep it there. But the shadows were gathering, and I knew with sick certainty that soon they would strike. By the third week of November 2025, the anonymous gifts had become a rhythm Grace could almost trust. Each morning, fresh groceries appeared on the doorstep of the Hill House, Korean staples like rice gochujang and dried seaweed mixed with American comforts like oatmeal and fresh milk for the children. A discreet envelope once held cash for utilities she no longer worried about. The children's laughter echoed through rooms that smelled of lemon polish instead of mildew. Mia's doctor visits showed improvement, her small face rounding out from regular meals. Grace kept working the early shift at Grandma's table, sweeping floors and wiping counters before the shop opened. It was her way of holding on to dignity, of proving to herself that she was not just a recipient of charity. I watched her from my corner booth every morning, heart pounding with a love that grew more unbearable each day. She moved with quiet grace despite the lingering frailty. Thin wrists, shadows under her eyes from old sleepless nights. But there was a new lightness in her step. One gray morning, as rain tapped the windows, she approached my table with the coffee pot. Her hands trembled slightly as she refilled my cup without being asked. Then, instead of walking away, she placed something small beside my bowl, a jade noriga pendant on a red cord. Traditional Korean ornamentation I recognized from my mother's jewelry box. I had sent similar gifts for the children, but this one was different, older, priceless. "I found this in Mia's coat pocket," she said softly, voice restrained and respectful. She said the nice man gave it to her for protection, but I think it belongs to you. Our eyes met and recognition flashed across her face like lightning. Fear first, sharp, instinctive, then confusion, dizziness as the pieces fell into place. She swayed slightly, gripping the edge of the table for balance. I reached out instinctively, steadying her arm. Her skin was warm now, no longer cold from endless nights without heat. "It's you," she whispered, shock deepening into something raw and vulnerable. "All this time, the house, the doctors, everything, Mr. Kim, Daniel." I nodded, unable to speak at first. The love I had carried in silence roared to the surface. "Yes, it's me." She pulled her hand back slowly, not in rejection, but as if touching me might make the moment shatter. Tears welled, but she blinked them away. "Why hide it?" "Because I didn't want you to feel obligated. I said, voice rough with emotion. I didn't want you to look at me and see the man who rules through fear. I wanted you to see just me. Grace sat across from me then, the first time she had ever done so. The shop was still empty, Mrs. Park in the back pretending not to notice. Grace's fingers traced the notorious curiosity overcoming fear. This must be worth more than everything I've ever owned. Why give it to my baby? For protection. I repeated her daughter's words, because I would give anything to keep you all safe. Her breath caught, the weight of it, the contrast between her old life of humiliation and hunger and this overwhelming care from a man of my power hit her fully. She pressed a hand to her chest, emotional numbness giving way to pain. I don't know how to live in this world you've given us. I keep waiting for it to be taken away. I reached across the table, taking her hand firmly. It won't be. I swear it. From that morning, the quiet gratitude began. Grace left extra banchan on my table, perfectly seasoned fernbreak. One day, sweet glazed lotus root the next. She warmed my tea without asking. Placed a small doenjang figurine beside my bowl to ward off bad spirits, just as she had told the children I was doing for them. Each gesture was small, heartfelt, a bridge across the chasm between our worlds. But the rivals grew bolder. One afternoon, a car followed Grace home from the market, slow and deliberate. My security intercepted it miles from the house, a tense standoff on a quiet side street, engines rumbling, men staring through tinted windows. The driver backed off when he recognized my plates, but the message was clear. They were closing in. I arrived at the house that evening, unannounced, storm clouds gathering in my heart. Grace met me at the door, sensing the tension. What happened? She asked, voice soft but steady. Someone's testing me, I said. Because of you. Fear flashed in her eyes, then resolve. She stepped closer, placing her hand on my chest. Then let them come. You've given us strength. We're not running anymore. I pulled her into my arms, kissing her with a passion that silenced the turmoil inside me. In her embrace, the remorse and guilt quieted, replaced by fierce determination. I would end this threat not with blood, but with the kind of power that made men disappear from streets without a trace. Later, as the children slept, we sat together on the patio. Grace rested her head on my shoulder, fingers intertwined with mine. I used to pray for someone to see us, she whispered. I never imagined it would be you. I kissed her temple, holding her close. The love was no longer forbidden. It was everything. And I would protect it with every ounce of the empire I had built. The recognition changed everything and nothing at once. Grace no longer left anonymous gestures. She waited for me at Grandma's table each morning, her shy smile lighting the dim shop like sunrise. We talked in low voices over steaming bowls about the children's progress, about small dreams she had buried under years of survival. Her hand would brush mine when passing the tea, lingering just long enough to send fire through my veins. The love that had burned in secret now blazed openly, fierce and consuming. One late November evening in 2025, a blackout storm rolled over Los Angeles. Power failed across Koreatown, plunging the streets into darkness broken only by lightning. I drove to the Hill House through sheets of rain, worry gnawing at me. The children would be frightened. Grace would be alone. I let myself in with the key I had given her, shaking water from my coat. The house was lit by candles she had found in a drawer, soft flames dancing on every surface. Grace stood in the kitchen trying to calm Mia, who clung to her leg. When she saw me, relief flooded her face, then something deeper, warmer. You came, she whispered, voice trembling with emotion. I'll always come, I said, pulling her into my arms. The children, reassured by my presence, soon fell asleep on the living room sofa under blankets. Grace and I retreated to the kitchen, the storm raging outside like the one inside my heart. We sat close at the table, candlelight gilding her features. She wore one of my sweaters, sleeves rolled up the fabric, swallowing her still slender frame. I reached for her hand, tracing the faint scars on her knuckles, marks of endless labor of nights spent scrubbing floors for pennies. I used to hate these hands, she said quietly, voice soft and restrained. They never earned enough to keep us warm. Now they feel different because you look at them like they're precious. I brought her hand to my lips, kissing each fingertip. They are precious. You are precious. Her breath caught. Years of poverty had taught her to expect nothing, to brace for loss. The tenderness in my voice, the wealth and power that let me shield her from the world, it overwhelmed her. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She swayed toward me, dizziness from the intensity of it all, and I caught her, pulling her onto my lap. In the flickering candlelight with thunder shaking the windows, our kiss began slow and searching. Then it deepened into something desperate, passionate, a release of everything we had both carried alone for too long. My hands framed her face, fair skin against dark, the contrast a reminder of worlds bridged by this impossible love. She clung to me, fingers tangling in my hair, body trembling with shock and need. "I've been so alone," I confessed against her lips, voice breaking. "Since Dae-hyun. I thought I'd never feel this again, but you've brought me back to life." Grace pulled back slightly, eyes wide with emotion. "And you've given me a life I never dreamed possible. But Daniel, I'm scared. Scared of what your world might do to us." The words pierced me. Remorse flooded in remorse for the danger I had already brought to her door. I held her tighter. "I'll protect you, with everything I have." We made love that night on the soft rug before the fireplace, candle flames casting golden light over us. It was tender and fierce, worshipful and urgent. Every touch was a promise, every sigh a surrender. For the first time, the storm inside me stilled, completely replaced by the warmth of her body against mine. But dawn brought reality. My phone lit with messages from Min-ho. The cartel-linked crew had escalated. They had firebombed an empty warehouse on the edge of my territory, a warning shot. And worse, a threatening note delivered to one of Grace's old neighbors asking about the woman living in Kim's house now. I left before she woke, kissing her forehead as she slept. Guilt and love tearing me apart. I could not let my enemies near her. That afternoon, I orchestrated a bold confrontation. I drove alone into their territory, a busy market street in South Los Angeles, and waited outside their known hangout. When their leader emerged with 4 men, surprise turned to wariness. "We need to talk," I said, stepping from my car. The street tensed around us, vendors pausing, pedestrians hurrying away. His men fanned out. Mine appeared from nearby vehicles. The air crackled with danger. "You're a long way from home, Kim," he sneered. "Not when you're threatening what's mine," I replied, voice deadly calm. "The woman, the children, stay away. Or this becomes war." He laughed at first, but my stare, cold absolute, silenced him. "You'd risk everything for some. She is everything." I cut in. "End this now." The standoff lasted minutes that felt like hours. Finally, he nodded once, backing down. My dominance held, but the cost was the growing fear in my heart. How many more times could I push them back before they struck? When I wasn't looking, I returned to the house that evening, finding Grace in the garden with the children. She ran to me, sensing the strain. I held her close under the clearing sky, the passion between us now laced with urgency. In her arms I found strength, but the shadows were closing in, and I knew the real storm was yet to come. The passion that ignited in the blackout storm became our secret world. By early December 2025, Grace and I lived for stolen moments, late-night drives along empty Pacific Coast Highway where the ocean roared like the turmoil in my soul. Quiet dinners in hidden rooms of restaurants I owned where I cooked from my mother's old jjigae recipe book, teaching her phrases in Korean that made her laugh softly. The children began calling me Uncle Dae, their small voices filled with trust that both healed and terrified me. Mia's health improved daily, her cheeks rounding from meals she no longer had to ration. Grace's body filled out too, the sharp edges of hunger softening, but the shadows of her past lingered in her eyes. We kept it hidden. My enemies were too close, their whispers growing louder. I could not risk them learning her name, her face, the way she fit perfectly against me when we kissed. So I arrived after dark, left before dawn, my heart torn between ecstasy and agony. Each time I held her, the love deepened, fierce, overwhelming, a burning force that consumed every remnant of the cold man I had been. Yet the remorse grew too. How could I drag this pure light into my darkness? One crisp evening, I took her to a secluded overlook above the city lights. We sat in my car heater, running against the winter chill, her head on my shoulder. I gave her the jade norigai. I had retrieved the one from Mia's pocket, fastening it around her neck with trembling fingers. "This was my mother's," I said quietly. "She wore it for protection. Now it's yours." Grace touched the pendant, eyes filling with tears. "Daniel, this is too much. I have nothing like this to give you." "You give me everything," I whispered, pulling her close. Our kiss was slow, deep, filled with the passion we no longer tried to contain. She straddled my lap, hands framing my face, and we lost ourselves in each other, tender, urgent, the windows fogging with our breath. In that moment, the wealth that surrounded me meant nothing. Only her, only this love that had blossomed against all reason, but reality intruded even there. My phone buzzed Min-ho. A rival faction had ambushed one of my delivery trucks in broad daylight, a bold strike meant to draw me out. They left a message, "Tell Kim his new family won't save him." I shielded Grace from the details, but she felt my tension. "What is it?" she asked, voice soft, fearful. "Nothing I can't handle," I lied, kissing her forehead. Inside, turmoil raged. The guilt was excruciating. I had brought this danger to her door. My power, my dominance had always protected me. Now it endangered the only people who mattered. The next day, I orchestrated a direct response. I drove into enemy territory alone, pulling up outside their main social club on a busy afternoon street. Crowds milled around food trucks, unaware of the storm brewing. Their leader emerged with 6 men, surprise turning to defiance. "You got balls coming here, Kim," he said. "I'm here to end this," I replied, voice calm but edged with steel. My men appeared from nearby cars, forming a silent perimeter. The street tensed, pedestrians sensing danger hurrying away. His crew shifted hands, hovering near waistbands. "You think your money makes you untouchable?" he sneered. "I think threatening a woman and her children makes you dead," I said quietly. The words carried across the space, chilling the air. He hesitated, calculating. My stare, unblinking, absolute, reminded him of every story he had heard about me. No shots fired, no blows landed, but the standoff ended with him backing down, muttering promises of peace he knew he had to keep. I returned to Grace that night, finding her in the kitchen preparing dinner from my mother's recipes. The children were doing homework at the table, laughing over something Isaiah drew. The domestic warmth hit me like a physical force. I pulled Grace aside, holding her tightly. "I can't lose you," I confessed, voice breaking. "This love, it's everything I thought I'd never have again." She cupped my face, eyes shining. "Then don't hide it anymore. I'm not afraid. Not with you." We made love that night in the master bedroom, slowly, reverently whispering promises in the dark. Her body against mine, her soft sighs, the way she said my name, it was salvation. The passion was no longer stolen. It was ours, blooming fully despite the shadows. But as I held her afterward, watching her sleep, the inner conflict raged harder than ever. My empire had given her safety, but it could take it away in an instant. The remorse was a living wound. I had saved her from poverty's cruelty only to risk a worse fate. Outside, the city lights glittered like stars I could buy but never touch. Inside, with Grace in my arms, I dreamed of a life beyond the shadows, a life where love could live in the open. I knew that dream was fragile, and I would fight to my last breath to make it real. The love that had taken root in secret now bloomed openly, fragile and fierce in the quiet corners of our stolen life. By mid-December 2025, the Hill House had become a sanctuary where the children ran barefoot across warm floors, where laughter replaced the silence of empty nights. Grace no longer flinched at sudden sounds. Her shoulders relaxed when I entered the room. She wore the jade norigai every day, fingers tracing it absent-mindedly as she watched the children play. I had never known such peace, and it terrified me. We lived in careful rhythm. Mornings at Grandma's table, where she served me coffee with a small, private smile that made my heart stutter. Evenings in the house where I arrived after dark, slipping through the gate like a shadow. We made love with the urgency of people who knew time was borrowed, slow and reverent one night, desperate and consuming the next. Each touch was a promise, each whisper a vow. She called me Daniel in the dark, her voice soft and trembling with wonder, as if saying my name aloud made the miracle real. Yet the shadows grew longer. The cartel-linked crew had gone silent after the street confrontation, but silence from such men was never peace, it was preparation. My lieutenants reported whispers in the old neighborhood, questions about Kim's new weakness. A delivery driver I trusted had been approached, offered money for information. Each report carved deeper into my chest, remorse and rage twisting together until I could barely breathe. One evening, I arrived at the house earlier than usual. Grace met me in the foyer, wearing the soft sweater I had given her, eyes bright with something new, contentment. The children were upstairs doing homework. She pulled me into the living room where a small Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with ornaments the children had made from paper and string. She had insisted on it, her first real holiday in years. "I never thought I'd have this again," she said softly, pressing herself against me. "A tree, presents, you." I kissed her deeply, hands framing her face. The love surged, overwhelming a tide that drowned every doubt. "You deserve all of it," I whispered, "and more." We stood there wrapped in each other until the moment shattered. My phone vibrated. Min-ho, boss, they hit the warehouse on 5th, firebombed it, left a message, your new family sends regards. The words struck like ice water. Grace felt me stiffen. What is it, she asked. Voice timid fear creeping back. I pulled her close, shielding her from the truth. Nothing I can't handle. I lied again, but inside the storm raged. How many more lies could I tell her before the darkness reached her? I left that night with a plan. The next afternoon, I drove into their territory alone, pulling up outside their main hangout, a rundown bar in South Los Angeles. The street was busy with afternoon traffic vendors selling fruit from carts, children playing nearby. I stepped out unarmed, my presence alone enough to silence the chatter. Their leader emerged with 5 men, wariness etched on his face. You got a death wish? Kim. I'm here to end this, I said calmly. You want war? You'll get it. But know this, if anything happens to her or the children, there won't be a corner of this city left for you to hide. The air thickened. His men shifted hands, hovering. A crowd gathered at a distance, curious, frightened. He stepped forward, voice low. You think love makes you strong? It makes you weak. I met his gaze without blinking. It makes me unstoppable. The standoff lasted minutes, tense, electric, no word spoken. Finally, he backed down, nodding once. We're done. For now. I drove back to the house, heart pounding. Grace waited on the porch, sensing the storm in me. She ran into my arms, holding me tightly. Tell me what's wrong, she pleaded softly. I held her close, breathing her in. I'm afraid, I admitted, voice breaking. Afraid I'll lose you because of who I am. She pulled back, cupping my face. Then, let me help you carry it. I'm not fragile anymore. You've given me strength. We made love that night with a tenderness that bordered on reverence, tears mingling with kisses, promises whispered against skin. The passion was deeper than ever, fierce, complete, a lifeline in the gathering dark. Later, as she slept in my arms, I stared at the ceiling, the inner conflict raging harder than ever. Love had given me everything and cost me everything. I had saved her from poverty's cruelty, only to risk a worse fate. The remorse was a living wound, but the love was stronger. Outside, the city lights glittered like distant stars. Inside, with Grace beside me, I held on to hope, even as the shadows closed in. The call came on a cold December morning in 2025, just as the first light touched the city. I was in the middle of a tense negotiation with a rival syndicate in a downtown hotel suite, trying to broker a fragile peace that would keep Grace and the children safe, when my phone rang with a number I had not seen in years, my personal attorney, Philip Park. Daniel, he said, voice grave. It's over. You've been betrayed. Shots fired. You didn't make it. The world tilted. Pain exploded in my chest, sharp burning as bullets tore through me. I had walked into this meeting with trust I should never have given. My nephew Eric Kim, the spoiled, ambitious one I had kept at arm's length, had sold me out for a bigger share of the empire. I collapsed against the table, blood pooling my last thought. Grace's face, her smile, the warmth of her in my arms. I died reaching for a life I had only just found. But death was not the end. Grace received the summons 3 days later. Black SUVs pulled up to the Hill House, discreet security escorting her and the children downtown to my law firm's towering office. She arrived pale, confused, clutching Mia's hand, the jade norigai around her neck, the only color against her dark coat. The children stayed in a private waiting room with a trusted nanny I had arranged long ago. In the conference room, Eric sat smugly at one end of the long walnut table, surrounded by his allies, men who had smiled to my face while plotting behind my back. He expected triumph. The empire, hundreds of millions in legitimate holdings, real estate investments I had quietly cleaned over the years, was to be his. Philip Park entered with armed security, face solemn. Grace sat opposite Eric, small and out of place in her simple dress, but her chin high. She had no idea what was coming. Philip opened the sealed will. To my nephew, Eric Kim, he read, I leave $5 million in the family home and soul. You have ambition, but not wisdom. Learn the difference. Eric's face twisted in rage. 5 million. That's an insult. The company is worth. Philip continued calmly. The bulk of Daniel Kim's estate liquidated criminal assets now fully legitimate, including the Koreatown commercial holdings investment portfolios valued at over $800 million, and majority control of Kim Legacy Enterprises goes to Grace Thompson. The room erupted. Eric shot to his feet, face red. A nobody. Some street woman he picked up. This is fraud. Grace froze, shock hitting her like a wave. Dizziness washed over her. She gripped the table, breath shallow. From crushing poverty nights without heat, choosing between medicine and food, to this it was impossible. Tears filled her eyes, confusion deepening into pain. Me, she whispered, voice soft, timid. Why me? Philip slid a thick folder across the table. Because Daniel saw in you what he lost long ago, a heart that never stopped fighting for family. He spent his final months restructuring everything to protect you and the children. The house, the medical trust for Mia, the education funds, all irrevocable. Eric lunged forward, restrained by security. She's nothing, a charity case. Grace stood slowly, trembling but steady. I was nothing, she said quietly, voice restrained but clear. I was hungry, cold, powerless. Your uncle saw me when no one else did. He loved me, and I loved him. The words broke her. Sobs came then, deep and tearing. She sank back into the chair, numbness overtaking shock. The contrast, her old life of humiliation against this sudden power, overwhelmed her completely. Philip handed her a sealed envelope. From Daniel, to be read in private. Eric stormed out, vowing lawsuits, but the security presence and ironclad documents silenced him for now. The empire was shattered, my criminal world dissolved, legitimate wealth transferred, all to her. Grace returned home in a daze, the children asking questions she could not yet answer. That night, alone in our bedroom, she opened the letter. My dearest Grace, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't stay to build the life we dreamed of. But know this, loving you was the best thing I ever did. You and the children gave me back my heart. Everything I have is yours. Use it to keep them safe, to build the future you deserve. The company board is loyal. They know my wishes. Eric will fight, but he cannot win. Live in the light, my love. Be happy. And when you look at the stars, know I'm watching, loving you still. Forever yours, Daniel. She wept until dawn, clutching the letter to her chest. The pain was excruciating. Loss of the man who had pulled her from darkness mingled with the dizzying weight of power she never sought. But in the grief, resolve grew. She would honor me. She would protect what I had given her. The battle with Eric was coming. But Grace Thompson, once destitute, now guardian of my legacy, was ready. Grace sat alone in the penthouse study I had left her, the one hidden behind a false bookshelf in my downtown tower. The key from the envelope fit perfectly, the heavy oak door swinging open to reveal a room untouched since my last visit. Books lined the walls, floor to ceiling, from Korean classics to business ledgers. A worn leather armchair faced a massive corkboard covered in photographs, notes, and red string connecting years of careful planning. She stepped inside, heart pounding, the jade norigai warm against her skin. The air smelled faintly of old paper and my cologne, a scent that brought fresh tears. On the desk lay another envelope with her name in my handwriting. Beside it, a small bronze dokebi figurine, the one she had once left on my table at Grandma's table. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope. My beloved Grace, this room holds the truth. I never found the courage to tell you in life. Look at the board. See the story I carried alone. She turned to the corkboard. At the center was a faded hospital record from the 1980s, yellowed paper clipped carefully. A nurse's note. Patient Kim Ji-yeon, terminal. Nurse Thompson stayed past shift to hold her hand. Patient passed peacefully. Grace's breath caught. Nurse Thompson, her mother. The woman who had worked double shifts in public hospitals, coming home exhausted but always with a smile for her children. The woman who had died young from overwork, leaving Grace to raise her siblings in the poverty that had shaped every desperate day. More photos, surveillance images of Grace over the years, walking the children to school in threadbare coats, waiting in free clinic lines, crying alone on cold nights. Not stalking, but watching, protecting from afar. A handwritten note in my script. She has her mother's heart. The kindness that saved my mother in her final hours. I searched for decades to repay that debt, found it in Grace, the woman who never stopped fighting for her children, no matter how the world crushed her. Tears streamed down Grace's face. Shock hit first, dizziness forcing her to grip the desk, then deep confusion, emotional numbness washing over her. The man she loved, the powerful Daniel Kim, had known her suffering long before Zoe ran to him that rainy night. He had watched, waited, intervened, only when fate brought them together. Pain followed sharp tearing. The irrational cruelty of her past life flooded back the evictions, the hunger that gnawed at her children's bellies, the humiliation of food bank lines while others lived in excess. And Daniel, wealthy beyond imagining, dominant in a world of shadows, had carried guilt for decades over a kindness her mother showed his. She sank into the armchair, sobs racking her thin frame, still fragile despite the meals and warmth I had given her. The contrast was unbearable, from emaciated nights shivering in drafty apartments to inheriting an empire built on power she never wanted. But beneath the pain, understanding bloomed. Daniel had not saved her out of pity. He had seen in her the echo of a debt paid in compassion, a nurse staying past her shift for a dying stranger. He had loved her for her heart long before he met her. On the board's edge, another section files on the trafficking ring that had nearly taken her that stormy night. Detailed plans showing how I had quietly dismantled it piece by piece in my final months. Names crossed out, operations shut down. A final note for Grace. So no mother ever fears the dark again. Grace touched the photographs me in my younger days, fair-skinned and cold-eyed. Her mother in an old nurse's uniform, smiling tiredly. Full circle. Generational kindness repaid across race class time. She stayed in the study until dawn, reading every document, tracing the red strings with fingers that no longer trembled from cold. Grief and love intertwined, but resolve hardened too. Eric would come for the empire. He had already filed challenges, spreading lies about undue influence. But armed with the truth in this room, Grace was ready. She stood pressing the dokebi figurine to her chest. "I understand now, Daniel," she whispered to the empty room. "You didn't just save us. You were repaying a light my mother gave your family. And now I'll protect what you built. For us. For every family still in the dark." The deeper revelation healed something broken inside her. The poverty that had crushed her, the injustice that had stolen her youth. It had meaning now. It had led her to me. To love. To legacy. Outside, the city stirred. Inside the study, Grace Thompson, once destitute, now guardian of billions, and a greater purpose, began to plan. Eric's war was coming, but she would fight it with the same heart that had kept her alive through hell: kindness, fierce and unyielding, just like her mother, just like me. The weeks after the revelation in the study turned into a battlefield Grace never asked for. Eric Kim wasted no time. Lawsuits flooded the courts, claims of coercion, undue influence, accusations that a low-income outsider had manipulated his dying uncle. Tabloid headlines screamed scandal: Mafia king's secret lover inherits billions. Reporters camped outside the Hill House gates, flashbulbs popping like gunfire. Grace shielded the children as best she could, but Mia's nightmares returned. Isaiah grew quiet. Malik asked why bad men wanted to take their home away. Grace felt every assault like a physical blow. The old poverty clawed at her memories. Eviction notices, empty refrigerators, the humiliation of begging for extensions on utility bills. Now, dressed in clothes from designers she could not pronounce, living in luxury that still felt borrowed. She faced a new kind of cruelty. Wealth's war, fought with lawyers and lies instead of hunger and cold. Dizziness struck her in board meetings. Numbness followed when Eric's attorney sneered at her across polished tables. "You don't belong here," one said openly. The words echoed the old voices. "You're not enough. You never will be." But the study had changed her. Each night she returned to it, reading my journals, tracing the red strings. My love poured from every page, fierce, passionate, unwavering. It became her armor. When fear threatened to drown her, she touched the jade norigi and remembered Daniel chose me. Not out of pity, out of love. Eric escalated beyond courts. Anonymous threats arrived, tires slashed on the children's school van. Brick through Grandma's table window with a note, "This could be your house next." Grace's hands shook, reading it, old terror rising. She had clawed out of poverty's grip only to face violence dressed in suits. She did not crumble. Instead, she turned to the arsenal I had left her. Encrypted files in the study detailed Eric's betrayal, the proof that he had orchestrated the ambush that killed me. Payments traced to his accounts, messages coordinating with rivals. But more than evidence, I had left loyal lieutenants, men like Min-ho and Philip, who respected my final wish: protect Grace, guide her toward legitimacy. Grace called them together one rainy afternoon in the penthouse. Eric's allies expected a frightened woman. Instead, they faced one resolved. "We don't fight with fear," she said quietly, voice steady despite the tremor inside. "We fight with truth, The confrontation came on a busy Koreatown street. Eric's hired men thugs in expensive cars blocked the road outside Grandma's table, trying to intimidate staff and customers. Grace arrived with Min-ho and discreet security. The air crackled, pedestrians scattering, vendors closing carts. Eric stepped out smug. "You think you can play in this world?" he sneered. "Go back to whatever hole Daniel pulled you from." Grace stood tall, the dokebi figurine in her pocket for courage. "Daniel pulled me from the hole your world helped dig," she replied softly. "Poverty, fear, and justice. He saw my heart and loved it, something you never understood." Eric laughed, but uncertainty flickered. Min-ho handed Grace a tablet. She held it up, projecting the encrypted files onto a nearby wall, visible to gathering onlookers, including reporters tipped off anonymously. Payments, messages. Proof of betrayal. Eric's face drained of color. "You set up the meeting that killed him," Grace said, voice breaking but strong. "For money, for power." Daniel knew. He planned for this. Chaos threatened, Eric's men shifting, ready to escalate. But Min-ho's team moved seamlessly, a silent wall of presence. No blows, just overwhelming authority. Eric backed away, rage turning to panic. "This isn't over," he hissed. "It is," Grace answered. "Because I'm offering your men a choice." Daniel wanted them to have legitimate paths forward. Jobs in the clean companies, a future without fear. Walk away from Eric. Choose light. One by one, his allies wavered. Loyalty to me, to the man who had treated them with respect, won over greed. Eric stood alone, defeated not by force but by truth and mercy. That night, Grace returned home exhausted, collapsing into the armchair where I used to sit. Tears came, then release, grief, triumph mingled. The children found her climbing into her lap. "Mama? Are we safe now?" Mia asked. Grace held them close, kissing each head. "Yes, baby, we're safe." Uncle Dae made sure of it. In the quiet, she touched the jade norigai, whispering to the empty air. "I did it, Daniel. I chose love over vengeance, just like you wanted. The war for legacy was won, not with shadows, but with the light we had found together." Grace Thompson, once crushed by poverty's weight, now stood guardian of hope. And in her heart, my love burned eternal. 1 year later, in the soft glow of an October 2025 morning, I stood in the quiet kitchen of our home overlooking the hills of Los Angeles. The air smelled of fresh coffee and the faint spice of kimchi from the breakfast I'd prepared, simple eggs, rice, and sides that blended my Korean roots with the American comfort Grace loved. Sunlight streamed through wide windows, warming the wooden floors, and far cry from the cold, drafty apartments she had once known. I watched her from the doorway, my fair skin catching the light. Heart aching with a love that had only deepened since that rainy night Zoe ran to me. Grace moved with a grace born of survival, and now finally of peace. Her frame had filled out the emaciation of hunger and sleepless nights, replaced by health from meals we shared without fear of scarcity. She wore a simple cotton dress, the jade norigi pendant resting against her chest, a talisman of our story. Mia, now 5 and thriving after the transplant my resources made possible, sat at the table coloring a dragon with crayons that never ran out. Isaiah and Malik, 7 and 9, argued playfully over the last pancake, their laughter filling the space like music I had never heard in my lonely penthouse days. I had survived the ambush, barely. The bullets that should have ended me grazed too close, leaving scars that pulled when I moved too fast. But in the chaos of that hotel suite, as blood soaked my shirt and Eric's betrayal unfolded, my men had dragged me out. Philip Park's quick thinking and a private surgeon kept me alive, hidden in a safe house, while Grace grieved what she thought was my death. When I finally returned, weak, bandaged but alive, the reunion shattered us both. She collapsed into my arms. Shock giving way to sobs of joy, her body trembling with the disorientation of loss, turned to miracle. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered, voice soft and broken. "Don't ever do that again." I held her then as fiercely as the day I carried her from the rain, the love surging like a storm explosive, passionate, unbreakable. Never, I promised. And in that vow, the inner turmoil that had gnawed at me for decades began to heal. The remorse for Dae-hyun, for the violence that defined me, did not vanish. It lingered, a quiet ache reminding me of the cost of my power. But Grace, her touch, her forgiveness turned the violent tension inside me into something softer, a resolve to build rather than destroy. The war with Eric had tested us. He launched his campaign from the shadows, sending men to our gates, slashing tires, whispering threats to old associates. One tense night, his crew blocked the driveway and 3 black sedans' engines, idling like predators. I stepped out alone into the cold wind rain, starting to fall, my men forming a silent line behind me. Eric emerged, flanked by 4 enforcers, his face twisted with entitled rage. "You think you can steal my birthright for her?" he snarled, gesturing at the house where Grace watched from the window, fearful but unbowed. The air crackled with danger headlights cutting the dark, distant sirens wailing like omens. No guns drawn, but hands hovered near jackets, the standoff thick with unspoken threats. Pedestrians on the hill road paused, sensing the storm. "This isn't about birthright," I said, voice low and steady, the dominance I had honed over years carrying like thunder. "It's about what I choose, and I choose her. Walk away, Eric, before you lose everything." He laughed bitterly, but uncertainty flickered. One of his men, a lieutenant I had mentored years ago, shifted uneasily, eyes darting to Grace's silhouette. The irrational injustice of it all hit me then. Eric, born to wealth, throwing tantrums over scraps while Grace had raised 3 children on eviction's edge. Cold winds howling through cracked windows, her body racked by hunger pangs that left her dizzy and numb. How could blood tie him to legacy when his heart knew only greed? The moment stretched chaotic and tearing, Eric's fury clashing with my calm authority. Finally, his lieutenant stepped forward. "Enough, Eric. Daniel gave us purpose. You give us nothing." One by one, they peeled away, leaving Eric alone in the rain, defeated not by force, but by the quiet power of loyalty earned through compassion. He slunk off into the night, his empire crumbling. I returned inside, pulling Grace into my arms as she trembled against me. "It's over," I whispered, kissing her forehead, in that quiet moment of tenderness as the children slept unaware. We reflected on the absurd cruelty that had nearly torn us apart, the unfair fate that let men like Eric hoard while families like hers starved. But love had won. Transcending skin color class, the brutal gap between my billions and her former pennies. Now, a year on, we ran the company together. Kim Legacy Enterprises transformed into a force for good. Profits funded community centers in Koreatown and South Los Angeles, free clinics where no mother chose between medicine and meals, scholarships that broke poverty's chains. Grandma's table had become a hub, its corner booth preserved under glass, a plaque reading, "Daniel's Corner, where kindness changes everything." As Grace turned from the stove, smiling at me, the love surged again, overwhelming, immediate, a burning anchor in my fractured soul. I crossed the room, pulling her close, our skins contrasting like poetry. "I love you," I murmured, voice thick with the depth of it all. She leaned into me, soft and sure. "And I love you. We made it." The children looked up, grinning. "Uncle Dae, pancakes?" Malik called. I laughed, the sound foreign but welcome, and joined them at the table. In these moments, tender, ordinary, the remorse quieted. Knowledge of my past fueled change. Life lessons from Grace's resilience taught mercy. Education for the next generation ensured hope. Knowledge builds bridges. I thought, watching her teach Mia a simple Korean phrase. Life lessons from hardship forge strength. Education breaks cycles of pain. As the sun rose higher, I stepped onto the patio, Grace beside me, her hand in mine. The city sprawled below, flawed, beautiful, full of stories like ours. Love had transcended the divides, my fair skin against her warm brown, my wealth against her once dire want. Poverty could not chain compassion. Humanity bloomed in the unlikeliest soil. Knowledge reminds us of shared roots. Life lessons whisper that kindness endures. Education lights the path forward. To all watching this tale unfold, I wish you boundless good health, a joyful life overflowing with connection and daily peace that settles deep in the soul. Knowledge is our greatest gift. Life lessons shape our hearts. Education empowers our dreams. Repeat them in quiet moments and watch worlds change. If this story touched you, hit that like button, subscribe to Crimson Romance Stories for more heartfelt journeys every day, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that love knows no bounds. How did this make you feel? Does it mirror something in your own life? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one, and your stories inspire ours. Goodbye for now, friends. Can't wait to see you in the next video.